And there's Betty. Hello, I'm Craig Lane of Health Alchemy, fictional business practice, non-commercial entity. Let's just put that notice out there to the public. Well, this is a recording here. I broke my neck in a car accident 34 years ago and should have died in Dominican Hospital and lived. And there's been a series of initiations, experiences, and trials and tribulations since then that made me what I am. Through yoga was the start, and then nutrition, and then hospice work, and oh my God, then body work, then Chinese medicine, then macrobiotics, then iridology, sclerology, and self-study and other stuff. We'll just call it holism. Holistology, the term I'm trying to get into medicine. The holistologist. Come into the hospital and your front person you see is the holistologist, and they fill out an intake form and they know exactly where to send you. You're gonna have 3 visits with a chiropractor, 2 visits with a nutritionist, and 1 visit with the sauna.
And out the door.
And you're out the door. And your job is to fire yourself as fast as possible. That's my vision of medicine.
Assembly line is.
Teach them how to fish, right? Don't keep you feed them fish, right? So tonight, so becoming a nutritionist involved a lot of trials and error and a lot of mistakes. I began my career actually as a vegan in the mid to early 90s. And then by eating a ton of food and never getting exactly what my body needed, I dropped to 155 pounds, eating a lot of food.
Wow.
And I have pictures of myself, I'm skin and bones, and I was a macrobiotic. And the low point was when I was back east in Western Massachusetts up near Beckett. Pittsfield is where it was, Pittsfield in Western Mass. And I had this night where I had so much craving in me. So I wasn't giving my body what it needed, which was protein and fat. I was overeating carbs. We have a saying, when you eat carbs, you crave carbs. Because you overfeed, and then you get rot, and then the fungus likes to eat the rot. So that's why one of my teachers says, you don't blame your candida problem on the candida. You blame it on the fact that you're overeating and you've got rot. And so it's a more empowering view, but it's also a responsible view, which most of us, I've had my fair share of shirking responsibility for a good 20, 25 years. So what I came to is where I am now, and I have this class right now called Natural Law. And I spent my life realizing that I was talking to spirits as a 4-year-old child. My mother sort of shamed me out of it. Won't go into it too, but that was a big moment for me at 4, realizing, wow, people think I'm weird. So I probably should just hide my weirdness. And I think everybody in this room, and those of you watching this video, understand what I'm talking about. Why are you so sensitive? Why aren't you more like your brother? Some of you hear that, Make you more like your grandpa. Never complained about anything. It's just, what? My mom showed me the Bible when I was 6 and my brother was 4, the children's version. And we looked at it and we go, well, let me ask you something, Mom. If we have an all-loving God, then why would he make you burn in hell for 1 mistake? And she went, you guys aren't going to church. And we told her, we said, me and my brother, we said, if you bring us to church, we're going to make your life a living nightmare. If we're going to ask the tough questions, the preacher couldn't answer. I used to ask, Mom, what are the stars? Why are we here on earth? And she would sit there and roll her eyes and go, oh my God, I'm going to do with this kid. So fast forward through trials and tribulations to nature and its order. And somehow I had the fascination with how does things work? Reading the fantasy novels, the Tolkien's, and there was another author, Michael Moorcock. He had the Eternal Champion series. Michael Moorcock, believe it or not.
Wow. Michael Moorcock.
M-O-O-R, not M-O-R-E. M-O-O-R, Michael Moorcock, and the Eternal Champion. And it wasn't pornographic. Oh my gosh. It could have been a pen name, That's my projection, right? Oh goodness. So there were some discoveries early on, like let's see, what's one of my first discoveries? Okay, I remember looking at the nutrition tables for spinach and going, well, I was practicing permaculture 25 years ago, kind of beginning and looking like, well, how come this spinach over here looks better than this spinach? And then they've got this law of average thing here, but one spinach could have a lot more vitamins than another spinach if it's fed properly. And then one of my best friends, he didn't go into nutrition. He went to soil science as his bachelor's degree. And I went, wow, that's one way you could go with this, is you could nutrify the soil in a certain way and then Roy Lee, the founder of Standard Process, wrote a book called From Soil to Supplement. You know, so he knew the whole chain of nutrition started here. You could argue that it starts before the soil too, with the consciousness that, you know, the laws of the universe that are making the soil well, that's sort of, you know, beyond our reach a little bit. And so this whole process of how does nature make a plant? I mean, that's quite you talk about alchemists. Plants were outside today, you know, I came in because I was so hot and sweaty, but they can't move all day. Talk about alchemy. They're out there having to change all their chemistry to adapt to the heat and the wind and all that. And it's quite a miracle, you think about it, because we get to just leave. You know, they got to hang out on that all day and make new tissue and make their blood. And guess what? There's another discovery. Chlorophyll and hemoglobin are almost identical. Plant blood and human blood are almost identical. Now, if that doesn't shock you to the core of like the connections of life, then you're numb, man. They're almost, one has magnesium at the center and one has iron. And there's a few other little hydroxyl endings on, you know, I call them antenna. There's a central part of the molecule, and these little antennas sticking out the side. And I have a contention, Carl, that I want to share with you, but not quite yet. One of my things about how nature actually works. So there's a way, so I'm up here basically getting my report card of 30 to 35 years or more, just studying what I've observed as a test tube, having tried everything from pure veganism to pure paleo and everything in between, and even looked at Weight Watchers for a while and see what the value of that was. And it's like, so what's the value of Weight Watchers? Anybody want to? There's some value. I mean, what's the value of Weight Watchers?
Is that learning how to identify the calories from fat and
Right.
from carbs and
So self-awareness, right? Some awareness of how they affect me, which is what metabolic typing is. You play with proteins and fats and carbs and you figure out your unique ratio. If you don't have your fuel ratios right, you're never going to be healthy. Not in a zillion years. You put the unleaded fuel in a premium fuel tank, that car is never going to run well. And that's why I do what I do, is you got to get those ratios down. Most people are overcarbing.
so how do you figure that out?
You come see me. You can take tests online and self-experiment, but I got the tools all in my Google Drive. And so if you're not a tech-friendly person, you don't really work well with me then, because I'll just give you the links and it's like, here, you go run with it, print them out, do whatever you want. But I'm not one of those printing out stuff in big piles of paper anymore. It's just like, click, 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 here you go. You know, and you're on your way. It allows me to see more people. So what's the other value? Self-awareness, Weight Watchers.
Accountability.
Accountability.
Well, camaraderie.
Camaraderie.
Emotional
Community.
support.
You know, that's a good one too, because a lot of my clients, they float along, and I'm getting a bigger staff now. So we're going to have sort of a sergeant. My ex-girlfriend Noelle used to be that sergeant. And she loves the role. What, you didn't make your go? He's a Capricorn, of course. They love to lecture. Not all of them, but my brother's a Capricorn too. And my younger brother would lecture me. He still does. So one thing we're going to talk about tonight then is plant morphology. What does morphology mean? Carl, you can't answer. Form, right? So look at these different forms here. We have a couple of ways that the one becomes the many. There's motherwort, beginning of the motherwort flower. There's wild carrot, and there's lavender there. And then right here, this is wood betony that our ancestors viewed as a plant that helps with empaths who have poor psychic boundaries. And it's a mint. Not much smell, not much taste, but it's a good plant when you get the headache caused by a digestive disturbance. Very good plant for that. And which I believe is also due to taking on too much shit as an empath from the outside, and so your psychic boundaries come in again. A lot of clients lately, I'm tying their indigestion problems to, I look at their pulses and your stomach's just tight as a bowstring. You're taking on too much. And I go to their gallbladder pulse, and so you're making too many decisions, too much overwhelm, and then you're stomaching too much over here. And I was reading a client's daughter this morning, and I'm like, oh my God, you gotta like chill out. And they get it. I go, you can digest emotionally, mentally, and physically. You spend all your time processing mentally and emotionally, this gets less. That's right out of Chinese medicine student syndrome, where we get sick after the final exam. Why? Because they did all-nighters and spent all their time digesting mental stuff, and they get less down here. One of the other mysteries Bernard Jensen talked about related to this was, he says, wherever you put your attention on, whether it's your brain, your muscles, or your sex organs, or wherever you put that, that's where phosphorus goes in the body. And then that area gets bigger. So intellectuals do intellectuals really have bigger heads than people that are? I don't think so. That's the contention Jensen made. And I'm like, I don't think they really do. Lumberjacks have bigger muscles because they're using their muscles more and their attentions in their muscles, and sex addicts. I don't think sex addicts have bigger sex organs personally, but I don't know. But he had this contention about that. And do we know that phosphorus goes where our attention goes, Carl? We don't know that. That was Jensen's contention in one of his books, Bernard Jensen. But I like having Carl here now because he can hold me accountable for my audacious statements.
The only thing you could really say is wherever you put a lot of activity, whether it's muscle or nerve, they all work with energy, and energy works with ATP, and the P and the ATP, I don't know, triphosphate.
Right.
Is the phosphate group. So if you exercise your muscles, you start building more protein laying down, put on more muscle, so you put more phosphorus in the ATP in the muscle. So it makes some sense from that perspective.
Oh, and calcium phosphate's the crystal that makes bone too.
Of course, yeah.
So if you have a lot of phosphorus from ATP, but that turns into ADP, right? And then the phosphorus cleaves off one of the.
Yeah, when one phosphorus is the T is tri, meaning
Right.
three phosphorus molecules. When it's ATP, it has the most capacity to do work. When it loses a phosphorus, it becomes ADP, diphosphate, and then it has less energy, and then the body recharges it.
But what happens to that phosphorus group that's cleaved off?
It floats around as it is used up and immediately starts getting put back together when electricity flows through it. So
Okay.
it always has to be recharged, and it's recharged in the mitochondria.
Okay.
And so nowadays, most people complain of they don't sleep, they don't have any energy, at least in my practice. So,
Me too.
And you have the same. So, it's usually a mitochondrial dysfunction. And nowadays, people have a lot of mitochondrial loss because functional loss, because there's too much oxidative stress on the system, including all the wireless radiation, all the viruses we're dealing with now.
Right.
All of that takes a lot of energy. And the reason people get sick, one of the most common ones, is that the mitochondria aren't working well. The little bacteria that became organelles that produce your energy. So,
If you guys knew that part of nature in its order was, we had this adaptation where we were able to make energy, much more energy out of in our cells, because there was a sort of a parasite kind of bacteria that got into our cells and became the mitochondria. So it's a separate organism that adapted into our, right.
yeah.
So it's one of those, because that's what cancer is. It's anaerobic metabolism, right? So cancer is a much less energetic state, right?
Yeah, most cancers are very yeast-like, and they produce not by using oxygen and burning it in the mitochondria. They do it by fermentation, and that's a factor of something like 20 times less efficient for energy production. So the cells basically become yeast-like and very lazy and don't use oxygen. So basically all cancers are, to a large degree, considered to be illnesses of the oxygen metabolism and respiration at the cellular level.
Yeah.
And, if you don't move your body and you don't breathe on the oxygen and you don't stay active, then, things become more and more precancerous. And I predict we're going to see a big shift in cancer in the next year or two. It's already happening from the jab.
Right. I'm going to go into that a little bit. So
Talk about that. Yeah.
well, we're going back. I'm going to bring up Morley Robbins and the root cause protocol, his work. I don't know if you've heard of Morley and his work, but he has something called the root cause protocol. And he's been working with this oxidative stress model. I've got, pages and pages of his science and the PowerPoints, and it's starting to make sense. His contention is that all oxidative stress starts with oxygen metabolism. And if you don't have enough magnesium and copper to control oxidative metabolism through ferroxidase and ceruloplasmin, then that's the root of all oxidative stress, is that process right there. That's his contention. And we're getting all this vitamin D, fake vitamin D, this hormone D3, which is a sunlight filter. Vitamin A is your sunlight sensor. And there's all this science that points back to you take vitamin A to raise your hemoglobin levels. You don't give iron. And the science very clearly shows it. You can give medical iron with low hemoglobin. It will temporarily raise the hemoglobin levels, but then it drops still lower than it was a few weeks later. And plus the medical iron they're giving you isn't even the right form of iron. That's why you get constipated and your stools turn black. So we don't need as much iron as we're taught either. It's recycled quite efficiently. And that's why you want to check for excess iron via a stored iron lab marker called ferritin. The serum iron is only the amount of iron circulating in your blood, which is part of what I'm here to teach, which is life is process, folks. Life is not my contention. Here's where I'm going to ask Carl. My contention is our cells aren't looking at chemistry. Our cells are looking at frequency and energy primarily. And we translate that in our puny little brains as chemistry, but that's not the way life works. Life is not a series of still MTV images gone in sequence. Life is a continuous flow of which we have to put into MTV moments to perceive properly. But that's not the way life works. By the time we perceive the moment we're in, life has moved on to the next moment. Abraham said, I heard them say, the channel Abraham, how do you perceive humans? And they said in past tense, because they're always in the presence as a continuum of beings. But we're not. We're always a split second delayed by the time we perceive through our sensory gates, which I think is still up there. So would you agree, Carl? Maybe it's both and, right?
Yeah, I mean, to the degree we used, when I went to medical school, I was taught, that there are receptors in cells and there's molecules, and when they lock together like a lock and key, it unlocks process.
Right.
Nowadays, we know that things happen way too fast for molecules to make connections with receptors. You'd be dead, So
Right.
what happens instead is it's like two tuning forks. And as soon as this molecule comes in a certain geographical and geometrical and spatial configuration, it rings, and it happens at the speed of, radio frequency electricity.
Wow.
Gigahertz in the body. Everything resonates really fast. And now our technology is catching up to what our body is doing. And now they're starting to interact through frequencies. And that's the basic concept there.
Which is James Ewing's contention. He's been talking about that, what we're really, the trouble we're really in is the frequency wars, is his contention. I would tend to agree. So I have this guy, David Stewart. I was talking about it in class on Wednesday with Monica and a little bit Tuesday night. And this man, David Stewart, wrote a book called The Chemistry of Essential Oils. Subtitle, God's Love Manifest in Molecules. Took my notice of that. And so I'm teaching a chemistry course called Chemistry as Process in a couple of months. And so he outlines chemistry so well in this textbook that I have an image of it up right now. And I was going to go through some of the errors of, like, one man has the contention that Aristotle started the brainwash of where we are now with how we view the world. And right now these veils are being put over the way things actually are. I mean, I feel insulted when they announced the Delta variant, because I know nature's already made 10 zillion variants, and right there in the World Economic Forum, they list every variant they're going to go through ahead of time. Yeah, one of my friends said, go to this link and check this out. It's disgusting. They have it all planned, and it's right there, like the Batman and Riddler, the Riddler says, this is what I'm going to do, and he gives it to him in a riddle. I think cosmic law, they have to do that. Huh?
This has been planned for a long.
Yeah, long time. I think for 2,000 years it's been planned. Because guess what, folks? We're in August, named after Augustus Caesar. I don't give a crap about Augustus Caesar in Rome. Do you? And yet we're still living in their calendar, not even questioning it. The year functions by 13 28-day moons. 13 times 28 is 364. We're in this brainwashed model. Jose Arguelles talked about it back with the Mayan factor. They've manipulated our consciousness into these 2B forms of verbs. I am sad, I am happy. We're fucked up all day in these identifications with these states of being, when in Latin they get it right. I have hunger, I have sadness, but I'm not am it. And then we're in this 12-month year, that's actually a 13-month year. Don't you think that fucks with your psyche, with natural law? Just a little, just a little. And then they've been geoengineering the sky. I've been watching the satellite imagery of the Eastern Pacific for most of my surfing career, which is 40 years. So I have a large sample size of observing what was once spirals crossing the Pacific are now triangles and squares and things that, nature doesn't make geometry. So they've got satellites up there beaming down radio frequencies onto these storms, and from the mountaintops and from Navy ships. They have it all triangulated. That's why we're not getting any rain. And that's why we get fires and stuff. I saw it up in Oregon. I was up in Southern Oregon when it got really hot in the fires a few weeks ago. And 3 storms appeared where I was out of the blue. Big cumulus cloud appeared before I was sleeping every night for 3 nights. It was weird, to say the least. And each time it was surrounded with chemtrails. Just surrounded with a tic-tac-toe grid. One of them over Medford was a mile high. And then you could tell they tried to wipe the thing out, but there was no wiping this one out. I mean, it was like, oh my, I was driving into it. And there's just this one part of Medford just pouring rain, and everywhere else was like, not. I'm like, if it, because when nature makes a fire like that, when there's fire, it attracts the rain. That's the balance, the natural law. When I don't see rain coming in, because I used to see the satellite imagery, I can't look at it anymore. It gives me PTSD. I look at satellite imagery now, because what I once knew was natural. I know it's being completely manipulated now. And you think they're not geoengineering. I've been studying this in 2012. They're geoengineering every day of the year. Don't think for a second they're not. It's just more subtle on some days. I look up most of the time and I'm sick to my stomach now on a lot of days I go out, because I can see it. I feel it in my guts. It's like, ew. Monica hears it, you know. I have to vent to somebody, you know, thank God. So natural law. I need to make a quick contention because I just got an angel hit, but I need to acknowledge something. So part of natural law too is the natural human regard for compassion. And this woman I was dating was stuck in Dominican, and Monica and I orchestrated basically nothing less than a jailbreak, getting her out of Dominican, diagnosed with COVID on a 75,000 zillion PCR cycle test, because she had good insurance and they want to keep her in there as long as possible. And Monica sang. We're sitting in the lobby in Dominican. Monica's singing to this woman on the phone to get her, help give her the courage to get out. And she got out. And she was in on a 5150, which means she was a danger to herself and others. She caused a fire in her own house by mistake, but I think she was drunk. Now I think she was, but. So I want to acknowledge what you did, because that requires facing a lot of fear. And we've been talking about it. How do you face fear? With your willpower, that's how. What do you do to overcome fear? You use your will. Why do you think I can go out in 20-foot waves and surf? My willpower is saying, go try. Another part of me is going, holy fuck. But you still go. So thank you. I think that she sent me a little message a few days ago just saying, I owe you my life. And I said, you don't owe me your life. You owe a whole group of people your life. And so I just want to acknowledge that as part of natural law, is that's what we do when we're healthy, is we help others naturally without contrivance or effort or duty. Duty is a red flag to me. Like, it's my duty to see my family. I haven't seen my mom in 18 months. I don't do anything out of duty anymore. She's jabbed. I love her. Mom, I love you. But I've already worked on 2 people after they've been jabbed, and I got bloody scabs on my back each time. I don't know what this shedding thing is, but it's got me a little scared. Yeah, like all up in here. I've never had scabs there like this. It was like a little poison oak rash, and it directly correlated right after a couple of bodywork sessions. So, you know, I'm not one of those to shy from anything. When they were doing the light apple moss spraying, remember years ago, I went out and danced in the rain. I went out and danced in the spray.
Really?
Oh yeah. My angels told me to do it. You're gonna transmute it. I did. I was out in the driveway. I was over off Frederick Street in a friend's house, and we were dancing around, making fun of them. And I had this laser thing. I could go up about 2 miles in the sky, so I was pointing the laser at the planes, trying to mess with the pilots.
What were they spraying?
It was the light brown apple moss scare, which I knew was a scam, but
It's a terrible cocktail of chemicals.
Yeah, we had a massive bird die out there, like 500 dead birds
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
beach the next day. And then there was like a
Yeah.
huge number of people going to hospital the next day.
Oh, yeah.
25 years
And
ago?
of course,
25 years
Well,
ago?
during the
tons
light
of
brown
people
apple
didn't
moss.
sleep.
How long ago was that though?
Because it was like World War II, big buzz with all this. It was horrible.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Okay,
horrible.
wait, we're on tape, sorry. I'm gonna take back control, sorry guys. So I want to bring that back to just, and that's part of the natural order. You know, there's a saying in Taoism, it's just as much the Tao for the fool to question the Tao than there is for the wise man to follow the Tao. It's as much the Tao for the fool to question the Tao than it is for the wise man to follow the Tao. It is not my job to judge others' values, no matter how low they might be. If you're interfering with my life and well-being, then that's where common law comes in. We do something called the notice, which is, common law is a law of the commoners, and it's been taken from us, but it's right there. You can go into Wikipedia and they'll tell you, tort law, common law, law of the commoners. We're not using it, folks. That's why that shit's on the door. This is my law, in my home, in my land. You don't take my terms, get out. And that's what Bernie did last week. One of the planning people was trying to sideswipe my business because I don't care about this government and I'm not in commerce. That's my contention. So we gave him our notice. He wouldn't take the notice. He wouldn't take our terms. So she said, I don't consent then. We're not contracting with you. Get out. And they left. That's natural law, folks. I'm setting my boundaries. And each American can do that. The assembly, the courts are actually used to be the people's courts to gather. Did you all know that? Well, you don't know that. The kids don't know it. The youngins don't know this.
No.
They think the courts are like, that's why they want you to fear, right? That's what keeps you out of court, is that fear. For me, it's the fear of confinement, a caged animal. That's why I went to silent retreats for years, just to overcome that. I just sitting in the same chair for 5 days, basically. It's an incredible fear to overcome, of being caged for a long time. David Rodriguez went through it, and Annie went through it. Annie was in Dominican for 8 days with no change of clothes. They left her in the clothes she was in the fire with for 8 days, without bathing her, without offering anyone to come in. She was in lockdown in a room for 8 days. That's why she's a hero.
We could hear them in the background. While they're telling me she's free to go, we heard the CNA, certified nurse assistant, saying, no, don't you go near that door. No, you can't don't touch that door.
Well, the other one's saying, go ahead and go.
Yeah.
Complete gaslighting.
Only one in the room was telling her she had no right to leave. And they said, no, she's wrong. I said, then you go tell her. And it was best use of cell phones ever. We had the 2 cell phones.
That's right.
I never use my cell phone in a car anymore, but we drove the whole way there, keeping contact with Annie and calling every now and then to the 2 great nurses who kept telling the truth and who took the veiled threat of, you really don't want to get noticed that you're part of the problem here. You really want all of your colleagues to know that they can pay thousands of dollars for everything that they're doing if they're keeping her incorrectly. And they're like, oh, we don't need, no, she can go anytime. I'm like, great, you tell us again, what are the exact steps? They still made us wait there almost an hour, saying, oh, she's just not coming. And I'm like, no, we've got her on the phone. She's trying to come. The CNA won't let her leave. Would somebody please go back in and tell her again that she's supposed to be able to come? And then it was, oh, no, she doesn't have shoes. Oh, no, she has to take our socks. They're going to be a $600 pair of socks.
Well, because of the insurance.
Oh, yeah.
She had top-notch insurance.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
on
yeah.
every little piece, it was just,
Yeah.
don't take no for an answer and keep saying, okay, what now? What now? And then on top of it, appealing to Annie's goddessness. Just saying,
Yeah.
Annie, she kept saying, I don't think I can do it. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, good.
You're a brave goddess. Yeah.
You're a goddess. You just you put your shoulders back, and she just did it. We couldn't see her, but we could feel her. And she walked out tall and strong.
It was really sweet.
And she was so downtrodden when we first talked to her. It was incredible.
Wow.
So, she was so inspired and inspiring to just talk through all of this. That's why in the middle of the public courtyard, I'm like, can I sing to you? Maybe that, because we had to kill an hour while she could be going down the tubes with fear. And it says like, okay, how about I sing to you now? Plant a seed of yourself, and like all my little songs. And she's like, wow, I like that. It was great. And it's play to each other's strengths. Acknowledge and remind each other of how much really we are walking miracles.
Mhm.
That we got born at this time. This is important. We're doing this together and with each other. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Okay. Thank you, Monica. That's definitely natural law at its finest, in my view. So the thing I wanted to get to was, thank you. I think that to keep this somewhat short, we're at 8:40. I try to get these to an hour, but sometimes it really rolls on. So I'm going to go to this. For the people watching the video, so the study of chemistry is a study of matter. And this man, David Stewart, makes the contention that the same thing I did. That's where I got the idea that life is process. And chemistry is a snapshot of a chosen parameter at a moment in time of a process. So you can choose the red blood cell count, the hemoglobin amount. You can choose the white blood cell count. You can choose the liver enzymes. You can choose the cholesterol. You can choose, the triglycerides. They're all chosen parameters. Just like if you watch someone like a football game, you might choose one player and photograph them at a moment in time on the football game, right? Which is a process. So I tell people, until we have 2 chemistry results, we don't really have a process yet, because 1 is just a point in space, but now we get 2, and look, your glucose is going up, your glucose is going down. So now we see a process occurring, right? So that's how we can transpose single images to processes. If you watch someone watching a race and you have photographs every second of the person running around the track, well, eventually you'll still have a complete process if you string the photos together, right? It's no different with chemistry and lab work. So my job, and other people that I think that are smart health professionals, you say, I'm going to try and figure out differentially, they're presenting COVID-19, but I told this one guy, I said, I don't treat diseases, I treat people. So let's figure out your particular what makes you different with COVID, And each case has been fine. A couple of our freedom people have come to see me, and it's like, you look at the specific context is how I work. You don't have a symptom solution encyclopedia. Oh, you have a runny nose, you take this. That is not how it works. You have a runny nose, and I got 15 other questions to contextualize the runny nose. Is it because of damp cold or damp heat? Let's look at your tongue. Well, your tongue's yellow, that's damp heat. You got a rapid pulse, that's heat. You got a slow pulse, that's cold. Jonty knows that's what Chinese medicine, your differential diagnosis is what they call it. You're differentiating the diagnosis based on the unique individual in front of you. So my favorite diagnosis in Chinese medicine still is liver yang rising. I heard that, I was like, that sounds really cool.
It's a really polite way of saying you've lost it. You've got so angry that you're blowing your top.
But see, it's a nicer way of putting it, right? Like your process is your liver heat's going up into your head, and so because the liver is a heat producing organ, right? So I wanted to mention this thing about Lavoisier, but I can't find him. Lavoisier's theory, right? It's like the
French chemist, Lavoisier.
Yeah, he talks about matter can never be transformed. You can only add and subtract to what's already there versus transmutation, like silica transmuting to calcium, for example. So that was one of his errors of how chemistry got started, right?
Right.
Do you have anything more you can add to that?
Well, he and his wife were the first ones to really organize the interactions of elements and write equations or calculate how the volumes and the weights interacted with each other. And based on that was in the Western system, the beginning of formal analytical chemistry. Not biochemistry, that came later.
Right.
But that he headed in the French Revolution. Most people don't know that. He lost his head.
He did?
Yes.
Wow.
At least as I recall.
What a waste.
Well, here it is. The father of chemistry, 1743, 1794. His theory summarized as follows: nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed. He considered the atom to be constant in nature and that no new elements could be created or existing ones destroyed. No matter what, the atom would not disappear. This concept is called Lavoisier.
Yeah,
Lavoisier's law, the principle. And then that's when things started to realize, like, you probably ran into what was it, Jacques de Langre, the guy who wrote Biological Transmutations?
Yeah, Kevron.
Kevron, right. So I got a hold of that book years ago, and he made the contention, like he talked about, so why is there so much calcium in chicken eggs? They don't eat calcium-rich foods. So they measured the silica intake via, the grains they're eating and the grasses they're eating, and then they measured the input of the silica and then measured the calcium output of the eggs. And so the bacteria in the body was transmitting the silica to calcium.
Wow.
And there are various, so that through Lavoisier's theory in the toilet. And then remember the stove one where it was making Carbon monoxide from the nitrogen in the air because the stoves were getting so hot. That's also mentioned in the book.
Yeah, I mentioned that, and it's really simple when you think about it. Like you take the atomic weights of elements, like potassium is 39, hydrogen is 1. If you put potassium and hydrogen, you get calcium. Calcium is 40.
Oh, right.
You know, silica and oxygen make calcium.
Silicon oxygen.
Yeah, as I recall. Anyway, it's a while since I said that. But what it basically says is that, you know, when they studied inanimate matter like Lavoisier did, they didn't even have concept of atoms. When people talk about that, all came later, but they measured matter and they measured elements that they could react and figured out this element, this element. But what Kevron does in biological transmutation, it says your body is like a nuclear reactor. You can actually take elements that we normally think can't be created except in a high energy environment, like a nuclear reactor. You know, that can do by transmutation, but it's radioactive and so on. The body does that enzymatically or somehow. We don't know the mechanism, but of course,
Right.
it's not conditional standard science. So, you know, so it's one of those things they should look at more, but they haven't. And now what we're finding is that when you take really sensitive scales, you know, that measure micrograms, which is a millionth of a gram, then you can actually interact with your consciousness and change the weight of things.
Really?
It depends how they're structured and so on. So we're working with some scientists who are doing this kind of work. We're finding that there's weight changes from morning to evening of your body. And when you die, your body weighs less. Somebody said that's weighing the soul. I don't know.
Ah.
But there are things that change
Wow.
from being a living system with energetics and chi and life force, or prana, or whatever you want to call it, and an inanimate object where the ATP and all the other physiological or physical chemical characteristics, you know, they're all very important to study, but nobody's yet really defined what life force or chi is, but we're getting closer. So it's interesting.
Which is what I call a subtle science.
Taking this off of tangent here, what is this, grasshopper?
Oh, it copped on my plate, yeah.
We were
Copped
sharing
on
it.
Yeah. It was it's neat. Yeah.
Oh, wait. It could be a guru in disguise as a shapeshifter.
Yes.
So cute.
Yeah, it's a little shapeshifter watching. He wanted to be part of the lecture.
And it flies far.
He wanted to be part of the lecture, I think. So we'll let him be.
He's been making himself known.
Let him meditate on the ground for all there. We're still recording. So usually, so right now we're at this point where you kind of see that we're starting to see there's the hard sciences, things you can kind of touch, see, feel, and then there's the subtle sciences, and that's the world that Jesus really summed it up best in one of the gospel. He says, there are many mansions in my Father's house. That's very well put for how our consciousness works. There's all kinds of, in Hindu, they call them lokas, L-O-K-H-A. There are different degrees of consciousness, different universes, different realities. And the chakras are sort of that way. The densest ones down here, and they get progressively lighter. You know, earth, water, fire, air, sound. I call this duality, light, and then consciousness, and there's a whole chain of them going up. And they can be felt. I've been meditating. I do a meditation on those every day, just to feel what's going on here in the honor of the beings of that element. And so I believe that one of the parts of natural law is when we complete a circle of, I believe life is naturally grateful. So if we have to fake it till we make it, then our life starts to become more abundant when we just give thanks for something. And then it's sort of like this, or it's opening up versus this, which is kind of how we are right now with the CoBlab. I don't want to name it. So, you know, it's this versus this, you know, and that's what we're heading into. That's why I wanted to change the topic from the crystallization of thought to, we're heading into autumn, and autumn is nature's way of, you know, you see the trees, leaves turning a little more yellow, things drying out. That's because the life force of the plants in a colder climate would be going down into the trunk and the roots. So when the snow falls, the tree doesn't die. So what you see, the browning of the leaves, is the process of the life leaving the limbs and going down into the roots. That's the process occurring. And so in our bodies, generally right now, there's usually a shift, and I notice there's a change in the night, and there's a change in this mucus that comes out of me. I notice the lungs, because the lungs become dominant in the autumn. And that's a Chinese medical model, but there's definitely a process where we call it the seasonal cold and flu season, right? But it's programmed that way. We have to change the quality of our oil in our engine for the colder weather. That's what the transition seasons do. Think about if you live in Canada, and it's 30 below in the winter, you've got to have a different viscosity of blood to circulate in that cold of an environment, like the salmon does, right? Versus the summer, you want a different viscosity because you get all the heat, right? So that's what the spring and the fall are about, is the change of that. In our climate, it's not so dramatic. You know, we get a little wetter. With the geoengineering, where, you know, I actually went and looked at the relative humidity of Santa Cruz County from now back 20 years. And we've got about 15 to 20% drier on an average day-to-day basis over the last 15 to 20 years. Just the relative average humidity. So that's how much the air is dried out. I'm a longtime gardener. I have to water 1 to 2 more extra days a week than I used to do 20 years ago. Because the summers here used to be ridiculous, misty, thick fog. You don't even want to go outside. It's so thick. But they've dried the air out so much that it's like a foggy day now. Is like Tatanka once said, he goes, nobody knows what a real weather is anymore. And I couldn't agree with him more. Having seen a 1,500 foot wall of fog coming in over the ocean when I was a young man, many times, you know, I was surfing and seeing this, you don't see those anymore. This wall of fog is like, you remember, right? You see that thing coming in, it's like, oh my God, that thing's taller than the mountains. It's taller than Mount Umunum. Oh my God. You know, and we don't see it because that top layer of clouds has all been put into the desiccant layer, sent over to the East Coast, and there's the flooding. That's our water. They know how to make rain and stop rain. That's what Vietnam was. They were making rain over the Viet Cong, which actually backfired on them and killed our troops. You know, it was a horrible mistake. And that was silver iodide was what they were using back then. Now it's like, ugh, horrible stuff. So natural law then says plants have form. So we turn into Carl and Monica's, and I'm life Craiging and you're life Drewing, and this is life being wild carrot, and this is life being motherwort, and this is life being wood betony. This is life being a kombucha. And so my job as a healer is to help people understand, like, the first step in health is you got to have a clear chooser, and you've got to be able to make the right choices for your particular fuel tank and engine style. And until you know what those are, so your blood type's part of it, your ancestry is part of it. Because, right, if your ancestors ate lamb, because they all, you know, back 15 generations, you're trying to eat goat, might not work so well because you're programmed for lamb. And then if you're, then the metabolic typing test is how, just by your choices and your appetite and your nervous system levels, and there's a bunch of things you can measure, then you can see like whether you need fat for energy or carbs for energy, or you're adaptable either way. They call it a gluco adaptation or keto adaptation. And most people are in the middle that can adapt either way. I'm one of those unlucky souls that I'm on the protein type, so carbs for me are sort of like, get low energy. And that's how you know. An hour after you're done eating, if you don't have more energy than before you started eating, that meal didn't work. It's very simple. So when I was a vegan, I was always tired. It sucked because I wanted to be a vegan. I started eating meat and dairy again, and my energy levels went up. My libido came back, and I was like, I'll be damned. There goes my spiritual guy. You know, and then I realized I had another teacher that challenged that and said, I think the Dalai Lama eats meat. The Native Americans eat meat. And I think that your judgments are your own, you know. No one's judging you up there for eating animals. You're judging yourself and projecting it onto God. So shut your mouth. And that really helped. Yeah, it's just, it's all, in the end, I've been on the other side, folks. I've been on the other side 4 or 5 times. I know for a fact that there's just love on the other side. It's love on the other side. I've been there. I've been out of my body looking on it, and with just so much love, I couldn't believe it. Floating above it going, wow, I gotta go back in there and help that guy because he's really suffering down there, which was me, paradoxically enough. So that's the first step in nature in its order. And then nature has a way of like, okay, I broke my neck. Well, guess what? You don't have to have surgery when you break your bones. Like I see all the athletes and the football players, the baseball, oh, knee surgery, oh, rib surgery. It's like, I got a broken neck, broken wrist, 2 hernias, 3 hernias actually, no surgery, not ever. Because I got plants and I got center process and I got yoga and I got consciousness. And I'm 56 and I'm still surfing every day if I want. Is all these guys with these surgeries? They're not. And there's another part of nature's order. Is inflammation is your sign you're out of balance. If you have brain fog and you have cravings and you have low energy after you eat, that meal didn't work. So another part of nature's order is, you know, you get informed very quickly if you're out of line, but most of us aren't listening. So I lay it out for my clients and I say, here's the path. You know, you said you wanted to go to LA, but you keep turning around to San Francisco. You know, I see you want to go over here, but I see you going over here. So, you know, your trajectory is all off. I don't get, you know, course correction over here. Don't go back to those carbs. Stay away from the caffeine. See, the bipolar people, you know, I'm one of them. So I have to be very careful with caffeine, with sugar, and with alcohol, because that aggravates bipolar, you know, and lack of sleep too. So bipolar means you don't have your kite just flying around up there without anyone holding the kite string down on the ground. Right? Isn't that a simple metaphor? That's vata derangement. Your kite is the vata and there ain't no kapha person on the bottom holding the string. You know, oh my God. So his contention in this book is, you're gonna like this, Carl. He has a concept called the chosen ones in chemistry, and that all life is composed of basically 5 elements mostly. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and nitrogen. So they're the basic Lego building blocks of most of life. All of your carbohydrates and fats are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and that's it. And with protein, you add the sulfur and the nitrogen. So there's your Lego building blocks for your energy right there. You're breaking apart carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in various combinations and formations. Think about carbohydrate, a hydrated carbon. You reverse it. And I don't know, what's the formula for the basic sugar, like C?
C6H12O6.
See, he's got it.
It drew it into you in biochemistry.
I forgot. So see, that's how much we have it down, you know, in the labeling system. But guess what? Carbon isn't just carbon. There can be carbon 1 or carbon 84, and right?
Yeah, well, those are isotopes. But the interesting thing about carbon is that, I mean, not carbon, about glucose or sugar, is it's a ring. It's a ring structure, you know, the carbons are part of like a hexagon.
Right, because then, so you have this hexagon, which is sugar, but then you have fructose, which is a pentagon. And the body can't use fructose for energy, can it?
Those glucose and other monosaccharides or simple sugars get put together like the lactose, you know, it's lactose and glucose and so on. You know, so there's monosaccharides, but the reason I bring up this image of a hexagon being your sugar molecule, because most people, you know, are trying to feel sweet and trying to have courage, and all of that takes energy, right?
Yeah.
And if you think of your heart chakra as having 12 petals, or, you know, or you can see it as 2 intersecting triangles like the Star of David, then there's
Right.
then the more love, more glucose, proper balance with the hydrated carbons, because we're water beings. 99% of the molecules in our body are water molecules, not percentage-wise by weight or volume, but by number of molecules. So you're basically walking around water with more bacteria in your gut than cells in your body, experiencing consciousness in a time of rapid adaptation that we've never had before. Not only the climate and the electromagnetics and the chemistry and the viruses. I mean, you know, there's going to be potentially a lot of people leaving who can't handle the program.
But all we have to do is wear a mask and everything.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the final.
That gets you over the edge faster.
Here's the final bit then. I'm going to bring in the Brown's gas now. So I have George Wiseman's site up, and I learned about this machine behind me from a friend, and hide mini controls. So I want to show you this for a second. Okay, so this guy started making these machines in '86, and this is a Brown's gas electrolyzer. It creates a unique mixture of gases that are astonishingly useful, particularly due to electrically expanded water. is a negative plasma form of water, which gives the Brown's gas a greater efficacy in its applications. A negative plasma has excess electrons, which give energy to the process. In the case of Aqua Cure, a bioavailable energy for health applications. So you've had one of these, right?
Not this.
But you could explain it better than I could, I think.
You all learned in chemistry in high school probably that if you put an electric current through water and you have sort of an H-like apparatus where there's electrode on one end, it's called the cathode.
Oh, right.
And one is the anode, that the electricity splits water into hydrogen and oxygen, right? And there's twice as much hydrogen collects in one column than
Right.
oxygen, and that's why it's H2O.
Right.
Well, in Brown's gas, you don't have two electrodes. You put the thing through the whole water and you get a mixture of oxygen and hydrogen, but not in separate parts. So when you bring them together, they could explode. They're already
Yeah.
in that state.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now the part about whether you drink it or breathe it in or whatever, that is still being experimented on. Obviously, this guy who sells it thinks it'll really help health. And I've seen some anecdotal studies that it may be helpful, but I don't think it's a proven thing yet. But it's a very
Yeah, it's
interesting
not
thing
proven.
because when you take this gas mixture of oxygen and hydrogen together, but then you can actually weld with things at a really hot flame, but it doesn't hurt your hand. You put the
Really?
flame right through your hand, and all kinds of things like that. So Brown's gas was invented by this guy, Yule Brown, who I met once, and he showed me one of these generators. It's used in China, it's used in Soviet Union for various things. And it's being investigated for health purposes. So I guess that you're sort of pioneering something if you've got one and you want to use it with yourself or people.
He had a show on the Fireside Chats podcast channel. I watched it. My friend Brian Canary, who you met, sent me over to it. And then there was at least 100 testimonials of people that were making claims, nothing proven. But my career is studying results. And I see this much results and I go, this technology may not be around much longer. I better just order one. So I got the money. It was $2,000. And I had to wait 3.5 months because the Fireside Chat had generated such interest. He'd sold out his entire stock in his warehouse. So I actually called him up and said, what's taking so long? And he answered the phone. He's like, oh, it'll be a few more months. I had to make it from scratch.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is the kind of guy I want to support. So I'm
Called what again? Aqua what?
Aqua Cure. Annie has another electrolyzer, but it changes the pH of the water from 6 to 11. And she says there's applications of the different pHs. And so Annie has a different machine, but I guess there's a lot of these different electrolyzers that do different things with the water.
I mean, there's
A lot.
three things in water you want to know about. All analysis are based on that. One is pH. That's the pressure or the number of hydrogen atoms. They have a positive charge, as it were, or they lack an electron. So pH is pressure of hydrogen. The second thing is the oxidative reduction potential or redox potential, and that's based on the number of electrons that are in the water. And the third thing is the amount of stuff dissolved in water. We measure that through the resistance or the resistivity or conductivity of water or the dissolved solids or whatever you call it. And so your body works in all different pHs.
Is there a structure to the water too, then, that we might add into that?
Yeah, water can also be structured, have memory, put frequencies into it. That's a whole subtle thing. But in terms of chemical analysis, you can get a pH meter, an oxygen reduction meter, and a resistivity meter. And that's what your
Is that
water
impedance?
department does. What?
Is that impedance? Is that the resistance?
Yeah,
Is the impedance?
is another way of complex resistance.
Okay, right.
So dissolved solids or resistance meter, you can ohm meter and measure it too.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just not so accurate. They make special meters.
So I'm going to end the conversation tonight because this is going to go on for a few more weeks. And then we have on October 1st, we have a group cleanse. And so what I like to do is if we start off a sort of a compelling topic and then explore it a little deeper, because we talked about this in the Tuesday night class. This is what I call more the beginner health class because it throws in with common law and how to understand the game that we're in, which is, the matrix. And so there's a game going on around us of languages. And, if you say man versus person, if you say I make income or I have a job, that's what they're trying. Job used to be a funny word for like a criminal act. I got a job. I wish Bernie was in here because like Chicago gangsters, I got my job, man. Got a job, babe, in the bank. And now we say it like, and we've forgotten like a job isn't a very positive word. And income, and there's all these little words, and there's this language that they're using. And having been, sideswiped a few times now and seeing what David Rodriguez went through and Annie went through in Dominican, it's like, oh yeah, like, I don't know that corruption's ever been worse.
Yeah.
Like Annie got her insurance bill. It said, thank you for your visit at Dominican. 20 thousands of dollars later. This itemized list of all the bullshit.
Oh, she's lucky if it was only 20 grand.
No, it was more like, 75 or 80.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And
She's the third person I know this has happened to. It's why it was so easy to say, I'm not giving up.
I'm gonna turn the recording off of this part. So thank you, folks.